Have you ever been alone late at night, twisting the dial on an old radio, and just for a second, heard something that wasn't supposed to be there? A voice in the static. For Ethan, a lonely radio technician, that eerie fantasy became a terrifying reality. It was well past midnight, and he was in his basement, surrounded by the ghosts of old technology. He was working on a vintage analog receiver, a beautiful but temperamental piece of equipment. The speakers hissed with the familiar sound of nothingness, the sound of empty airwaves, or so he thought. Suddenly, a whisper cut through the static, as clear as if someone were standing right behind him. A woman's voice, shaking with fear, spoke a single word. Ethan. He went completely still, his blood turning to ice. How did she know his name? He checked the dial. The signal was coming from 103.7 FM, a frequency that had been dead for over 30 years. His logical mind screamed that it was impossible. A stray signal, a figment of his imagination. But his curiosity, that dangerous human trait, was stronger. His hand, trembling slightly, reached out and fine-tuned the dial. The static receded, and the voice returned, clearer this time, laced with desperation. "Help me," it pleaded. "Please, Dodd. They're trapped in the signal."
Trapped in the signal? What did that even mean?
Ethan should have turned it off, walked away, and never looked back. But he couldn't. It was Okid. That night marked the beginning of his obsession. Night after night, he would descend into the cold basement, drawn to the strange, impossible broadcast on 103.7 FM. With each listening session, the voices grew stronger, more enum. It wasn't just a woman anymore. A chorus of disembodied souls filled his basement. Sometimes they were crying, their sobs echoing with a century of sadness. Other times, they begged for release, their pleas clawing at his sanity. And sometimes, most unnervingly, they would laugh a cold, hollow sound that had nothing to do with joy. They weren't just making noise, though. They were sharing secrets. Secrets that no living person should ever know. They spoke of long-buried family scandals, fortunes hidden in forgotten places, and the final moments of people who had simply vanished. They whispered the names of killers who had walked free, describing unsolved murders with chilling accuracy. Ethan felt like he was listening to the collective subconscious of the dead, a switchboard operator for the afterlife. And every time he tuned in, a physical change would happen in the room. A deep, unnatural cold would seep into the space. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather. It clung to him, making the hair on his arms stand up. The temperature would drop so fast he could see his own breath fogging in the air. He was communicating with something, and it was draining the very warmth from his world. He started bringing a thermometer down with him, watching in morbid fascination as the mercury plunged the moment the voices began to speak. He knew this was dangerous. He knew he was meddling with forces he couldn't possibly comprehend. But the allure of the unknown, the power of knowing these forbidden truths, was too strong to resist. He felt like a god, privy to the ultimate secrets of life and death. He started recording the transmissions, filling tapes with the ghostly confessions. He told himself he was documenting a paranormal phenomenon, that he was doing it for science. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was addicted. One evening, as he settled into his usual ritual, the familiar chorus of lost souls faded away. For a moment, there was only static. Then, a new voice emerged from the hiss. It was a voice he knew better than any other in the world. It was his own. It was a recording of him, but not one he'd ever made. This version of his voice was broken, choked with terror and despair. It sobbed his own name. "Ethan, stop listening," it begged. "You have to stop. They're using the frequency to pull you in." His heart hammered against his ribs. The words hung in the frigid air, an impossible paradox. How could he be hearing himself on the radio, warning himself about the very thing he was doing? Before he could process it, the power in the house began to flicker. The single bare bulb hanging from the basement ceiling dimmed, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. The sound from the radio started to warp. The whispers twisted, their pitches bending and stretching until they merged into a single, rising scream of pure agony. He looked at the old receiver. The warm, gentle glow of the dial was gone. In its place was a pulsing, malevolent, red light radiating an intense heat. The plastic casing of the radio began to smoke and melt, dripping onto the workbench like hot wax. In the shifting patterns of the static on a small monitor he had hooked up, distorted faces began to appear. Their eyes were black pits, their mouths open in silent screams. They were the voices, and they were coming through. Panic finally shattered his obsession. He scrambled backward, his chair tipping over. He had to shut it off. He lunged for the power cord, but the moment his fingers touched the rubber insulation, an excruciating pain shot up his arm. The cord was burning hot, searing his skin. He recoiled with a cry, clutching his hand. On the radio, his own voice screamed again, louder this time, a raw, primal sound of absolute terror. "Turn it off!" And then, as suddenly as it began, there was silence. Absolute, deafening silence. The power came back on. The red glow from the radio faded. The room was still. A few days later, neighbors reported the strange power surge that had knocked out electricity on their block. When the police did a wellness check on Ethan, they found the basement door unlocked. The room was freezing cold, despite it being a warm summer night. And on the workbench, the old radio was still on, its plastic body warped and melted. It was tuned to 103.7 FM, and from its speakers, a faint whisper could be heard, lost in the static. The police found his tapes, his notes, his thermometers, but of Ethan there was no trace. He had simply vanished. They say some mysteries are best left unsolved. Some doors are best left unopened. No one ever officially figured out what happened to Ethan. His case went cold. Another strange disappearance in a world full of them. But the story doesn't quite end there. Local legend says that the frequency, 103.7 FM, isn't entirely silent. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the airwaves are clear, if you're brave enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to turn your dial to that dead channel ... you might just hear a new voice among the whispers. A familiar voice, broken and desperate, begging you to turn it off. You might just hear Ethan. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into the unknown, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chilling stories. Stay safe, and maybe think twice before you go looking for ghosts in the machine.